I was going to ask Nora if she wanted to check in and say hi on behalf of Advocate. We had a history of wellness ministry programs, kind of stopped that a little before the pandemic started, but we are very grateful for our friends through Advocate being willing to help with presentations. So Nora's going to help host, and then I'll let our nutritionist introduce herself as well, and then I'll do my introduction. Hi, Nora.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having us again. It's so nice seeing your face as though I think it's been over a year.
Yep.
And times were different. Who would have thought we would be in this situation, right?
Right.
We're blessed to be here. Sam, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with, she was unable to make it tonight. So I wanted to just step in, say hi. I talk about your parish a lot, Pastor, because it's one, literally closer to my house, but also it's been such a welcoming parish to not just talk about our faith, but also wellness and health. And this is just one component of it. And what a beautiful time to talk about fasting than during Great Lent itself. So I wanted to introduce my colleague, Leela. She's our dietitian, our expert on the topic today. I'm very excited for all the nuggets and great information she's going to be sharing with us. So definitely utilize this time to ask all the questions that you have. And while she's talking and you feel inspired to ask another question, she's pretty laid back, and you'll see her energy soon. But just ask her those questions, or save them at the end, however you wish. And I'll be here. So thank you again for having us today, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon after. But I'm excited for tonight.
Okay, so I have about 10 minutes on general introduction to Lent as a spiritual journey. Lent is a 40-day season of reflection for Christians. The 40 days correspond symbolically to the 40 years Israel journeyed through the desert toward the promised land, and the 40 days Jesus lived alone in the wilderness as a time of fasting and spiritual preparation. The traditions of Lent are derived from the season's origin in ancient times as a period when the church prepared candidates for their baptism into the body of Christ. Through study, prayer, fasting, and acts of service, candidates spiritually matured until they were ready for their new life in Christ. And eventually, the season became a time of spiritual preparation, not only for new Christians, but also for the congregation as a whole. Spiritual growth is the goal of the Lenten journey. The invitation is to do something to grow closer to Christ and to the journey with Jesus to the cross. We choose to make a sacrifice in order to try to understand a bit of the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross, but we also do this with the Easter promise on the other side, in order that we might more fully celebrate Easter with joy and receive the promise of new life and the power of the resurrection. Lent is a time of self-reflection and self-examination. There are times when God calls on us to stop in our journey through life and turn around. The Greek word for repent is metanoia, like metamorphosis. It means to turn around, but also there's the hope and the promise of transformation. Like the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, so Lent is a time of transformation. The season gives us an opportunity to turn our lives around, and we let go of practices and habits that separate us from God and distort our relationship with others. We open our hearts and minds to God's love. We listen to God's word. We ask God to show us what is really important as we turn toward God. We invite you to make this journey with us during this time of self-reflection and self-examination. You may indeed be led to repent and turn from something that is painful in order to turn toward the promise of God's grace that makes all things new. So ask yourself, what is important? What are the values by which you want to live? What draws you into a closer relationship with others and with God? What is God saying as God is still speaking to us during this holy season? So there are historically three pillars of Lent. It's based on the three ancient spiritual disciplines of prayer, fasting, and acts of love or service. While Lent is a time of self-examination, During the season, we not only look inward, but also outward towards our neighbors and our community, toward the world that God has placed in our care. To help maintain this inward and outward orientation, these three disciplines belong together. One of our spiritual ancestors, a bishop from the 5th century named Peter Chrysologus, warned that the spiritual harvest will be thinned unless prayer and fasting are watered by the works of love. Prayer knocks at the door, fasting obtains, and love receives. Prayer, love, and fasting, these three are one. They give life to each other. Fasting is the soul of prayer. Love is the lifeblood of fasting. Let no one separate them. They cannot be separated. That's the quote of Bishop Peter Chrysologus from the 5th century. The emptiness we sometimes feel when we pray could be the result of not letting our prayer flow into the way we live our lives. The ancient Hebrew prophet Isaiah said that prayer and fasting cannot be divorced from God's commandment to feed the hungry and shelter the homeless, clothe the poor, and break the yoke of injustice. This is Isaiah chapter 58, verses 6 through 10. This is the sort of fast that pleases me. Remove the chain of injustice, undo the ropes of the yoke, let the oppressed go free, break every yoke you encounter, share your bread with those who are hungry, shelter the homeless poor people, clothe those who are naked, and don't hide from the needs of your own flesh and blood. Do this, and your light will shine like the dawn, and your healing will break forth like lightning. Your integrity will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Cry, and God will answer. Call, and God will say, I am here, provided you remove from your midst all oppression, finger-pointing, and malicious talk. If you give yourself to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your shadows will become like noonday. So here are some ideas about how to do these three ancient practices during Lent. So first, prayer. Set aside some time each day, perhaps at the end of the day, to open your heart to God. Begin with a time of silent self-examination. Read a brief passage of scripture. Reflect on the reading. Conclude with prayer or the Lord's Prayer. Find a daily devotional or read along with our book study group. Find something to be grateful for and write it down. Put it in a bowl or a bucket or a jar. Second, our topic for tonight, fasting, could mean abstinence from certain foods, but also could include any choice you make to radically simplify your life. You've heard the question, what are you giving up for Lent? And by giving up, we mean letting go of something. A meal once a week or once a day, eating meat on Friday, or some possession or habit that's cluttering up our lives. Fasting is a way of self-emptying our lives to make more room for God. Now, traditional fast in Lent could be to give up your favorite food for the season, to abstain from meat on Wednesdays and Fridays, abstaining from alcohol, or perhaps you completely remove food and drink and do only water or juice, which might be observed on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. But a modern fast might include a commitment to spend fewer hours watching television or abstaining entirely from TV for the season. A promise not to buy luxuries or possessions we don't really need. A decision to clear out the clutter in our home and give to Goodwill or another charity those possessions we can live without. Fasting from food is not recommended for those whose health might be adversely affected, so that's why we have our nutritionist to help us do so in a healthy way. The purpose is not self-punishment. Instead, it is a spiritual opportunity. When eating a meatless meal, for example, you might want to reflect and pay attention to the food and think about those who go hungry every day, or those who labor in agriculture or in the food service industry with low wages and without health insurance. You might take time to learn more about the plight of family farms and the conditions which farm workers live through. In this way, your fasting, like your prayer, could lead seamlessly into works of love, which is our third pillar. As we heard, the ancient bishops say that prayer and fasting will bear no spiritual fruit if it's not watered by acts of loving service. So during Lent, perhaps children would be encouraged to set aside part of their weekly allowance to buy blankets. That's our mission project through Church World Service. Perhaps you set aside a part of your salary for offering or a local charity. Give time to ways that you can help your neighbors. While we can't do things in a traditional way, like through agencies in person, consider what we can do and try simple acts of kindness and outreach to show you care. These ancient traditions of prayer, fasting, and works of love can help us all as we walk on our personal journey through Lent. May God's Holy Spirit be our companion on the road. May it lead to an experience of spiritual rebirth when we together celebrate Christ's resurrection. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you. You're up.
So I will take some time to introduce myself. My name is Leela, registered dietitian. And I think that, as Nora mentioned, this is a great opportunity to talk about fasting. It's not too far from the beginning of the new year. And that's actually where I really start to love the differentiation reasons. I first remind everyone when we talk about fasting for Lent, it's to be accepted completely differently than fasting and abstaining yourself from something when it comes to New Year's resolution. Because as you indicated, Pastor, it's not to be it's not to be taken as a deprivation or suffering. It's to embrace something of a new opportunity. And that's always my disclaimer is when everyone listening, when you're going to fast for Lent, I want everyone to constantly remind themselves of their purpose, why they are doing it, and the value of it's there to allow for a bigger connection to the Lord, to themselves, because that is actually going to be your key factor when you are hungry or when you start questioning on why you want to do it. And I think that's why fastings or periods of fastings don't last, is because we lose that motivation. So number one is don't forget your purpose. It's to be seen differently than a dieting approach. And that is going to allow you to embrace the journey when you are saying, I'm going to abstain myself from sweeteners or things like that. A lot of the reasons why, let me just go over why we do give up certain things. Mainly is we give up things that are considered more indulging, but it's more as a means of saying, I'm willing to put down my self-desire and allow myself to show repentance and show that I'm willing to dedicate my energy to something better. Like you mentioned, prayer, something that's going to be positive to our lives. So by allowing us to say no to something that brings us good pleasure, in reality, it's not the good pleasure that we think, and we might find a greater pleasure and a greater connection with God and doing other things that are actually going to fulfill us. So we then decide to give up something that's considered indulging, sugar, fats, and I say that's a good start, because those things are not really necessary. We don't need the refined sugars. We don't need the excessive sodium, which would be people starting to decide to give takeout or fast food. So the excess sodium and things. And that's a good start because it's something that's reasonable and it's something that's going to allow you to give up something. Two things happen out of that. You have this momentum going. You're proud of something that you're doing for the greater good. And then you start to notice great improvements in energies and in your health. So there are studies have shown that there are a lot of just levels of health indices that have been improved during this time of Lent. But it makes sense because everyone is actually more dedicated and making better choices. So we're going to go, I do want to review on, let's say that we do decide on giving up something that from abstinence, something that is not the best for us. Well, there's not a lot of nutritional guidance that you need from there. Mainly really focus on your purpose and really know that we're doing it for a good reason, for our health. And it's really to dedicate yourself. I would say in long term, to make it long term, I tell, if you just want to do on every Wednesday and Friday to not give up something, I think that's more realistic, because you're keeping yourself motivated, you're keeping yourself accountable. And instead of saying, I'm going to give up sugar, well, it's so broad. So first I say narrow it down to the days. But if you say, I do want to do all 40 days and you have already started, I want you to have a clear definition of what you mean by what you're giving up. So when you mean sugars, are we saying added sugars? Are we saying all sugars? But that's so broad and it's not really realistic, because sugars can come in just from natural sugars, from carbohydrates. So that's where then it gets to get a little complicated, because then of course I want to make sure that we're doing it in a way where your body does not require sugar. So I will discuss health topics. Before we start abstaining ourselves from major food groups, we need to consider, are we in a state where our body cannot, as I mentioned, self-regulate itself? If we have diabetes or if we have risk of high or low blood pressure, it's obvious that our body alone cannot do that, and it does need assistance of something, of medication or consistent intake of these items that we need to keep our blood sugars up or our sodiums leveled. So those where I say, let's not get too specific and too strict with the fasting or abstaining from things. If you are someone that has diabetes, you know the importance of maintaining your blood sugars by having smaller meals, then go ahead and do that. You can still keep a fast in other ways. You can keep a fast from non-food items. It can be from technology things. So it doesn't always have to be about food, okay? And that's number one. But I'm gonna refocus on the bad foods part. If we're giving up bad foods like sugars and flours or sodium, let's really make sure we are abstaining from the things that are not necessary. So an approach would be like, if asking yourself, where am I getting this higher amount from? So I tend to do takeout. I tend to always buy the donuts from the cafe when I bring the box home. So it's just about saying, I'm gonna keep myself from consuming anything that's refined flours or sugars. What does that really mean? If this food item is not a natural made item, then we know our body doesn't need it. So bagels, there's not a bagel tree. We don't need bagels. So that is a refined flour and we don't need that. If we're going to be restraining ourselves from sugars, asking ourselves, did I physically add sugar to my meals? Tea, am I adding sugar to my tea? Am I adding sugars to my coffee? Am I adding sugars to my oatmeal? But many of us may not think we are. We might be buying packaged oatmeal. So those have added sugars. So two things, guys, if we have given up sugars or we have given up fats or sodium, number one is the biggest culprit is packaged foods. Those are all packaged foods are going to have all those three things added. So it's very important that we now start looking at our food labels if we are doing that and really looking at added sugars and the amount of sodium in these items. But that can easily be resolved by just making the conscientious effort, especially in your fasting days, to not eat anything packaged. So in the morning, starting your day with an actual meal that you make at home, whether it's eggs, scrambled eggs with vegetables, whether it's oatmeal from scratch made with milk or water, and you can sweeten it naturally, guys, with fresh berries, frozen berries, even dried fruit is okay. Having your lunch, be like, I'm going to do a conscientious effort to not do takeout, really planning to bring your own salad. You can make your own cooked, baked. If it's not on a day of fasting, I'm gonna give you guys two options. If it's not on a day that you're abstaining from meat, like a Wednesday or Friday, but you are still making the conscientious effort on the 40 days to not do takeout, you can bake chicken or you can bake fish. So that will still do on a Friday and Wednesday. But let's say you don't want to do any meat, then really planning to making lentil stew, vegetable soup. You can make a salad with garbanzo beans. So that's where it's really important to really be conscientious of your meals, okay, guys? So let's say we are fasting, or let's say we are trying to cook more at home to wait from doing takeout or fast or processed foods. Those are both going to entail the same goal. You have to make sure that your meals are actually balanced, because if you're fasting, you already are going to be low on energy or low on calories for that day. But if you're abstaining from certain amount from meat, you already remove the food group in your mind because you're used to meat as being one of the food groups. So it's really important that that meal is adequately balanced and making sure that you are having your proteins in all your meals. So it's important to understand what are sources of protein. We know that protein, of course, the obvious is the meat. Okay, well, we can have meat, or we are in that day, you're not gonna be able to have that. Protein can come from eggs. It can come from dairy, so your low-fat milk. It can come from yogurt. Greek yogurt is preferred, higher in protein, and of course the probiotics in there for gut health, or even cottage cheese. We can also do as all the legumes, the beans family, so lentils, garbanzo, pinto beans, black beans, and even tuna. Let's not forget about the fish now. There's tuna, there is tilapia, salmon, and even preparing ahead, guys. So let's say that we start making things for the week. You guys can make some salmon patties to get started. You can do breaded Parmesan tilapia. So there's other things that we can do. And I would say, if whether we're fasting or abstaining from fasting, some individuals will still eat meat after their fast, but some may not. If you are going to eat meat, again, it goes back to make sure it is fully balanced, and you are having your vegetables, you are having your healthy fats, because when you're fasting, you already moved a few meals out of your day. And if you don't want to feel tired at the end of the day, you do got to make sure you are eating enough carbohydrates and enough protein and enough healthy fats to fuel your body in that little meal that you can have that day. So it's not a reason to say I fasted. Let's order in pizza, because right now that pizza, it's poor nutritional value in the crust. You're hitting double whammy. The crust is refined flours. The sauce is high sodium. Anything that we do takeout or in a packaged food, guys, is going to have added salt and added fat. So we're not doing ourselves any help by doing that. So I think both goals, whether abstaining or fasting, are going to really require us in these 40 days to be more on top of the way we are preparing our meals and making sure that we are actually preparing it. But I always say it's another blessing, because this is a chance to have a reason to actually get creative in the kitchen. I think New Year's, we were like, okay, we want to eat more and cook more at home, or not eat out as much, but it kind of probably didn't happen, or as easy as we thought. So now that we have that bigger purpose, which is to allow for new energy, it allows us to say, I'm going to do something good. I'm going to give myself the gift of a higher nutrient food intakes to nourish my body, this temple that I have. And guys, we're going to do this as a family. We're going to start cooking, making our breakfast at home, as we mentioned. And let's make every Sunday night and every Wednesday our prepare ahead day. So we're going to batch make some rice. We're going to make some beans and roasted vegetables and have them all ready, so we can just get home and add our different forms of protein. So it's about doing this together as a family, and make sure that you are having lean sources of protein. And when I say lean, we know it's easier to talk about lean proteins because we're really not eating meat. And unfortunately, the fattier sources of protein are found in all meat products. So we already have that advantage. Really sticking to eggs or egg whites for scrambles, the beans and lentils, pushing those in. It's a chance to do like a whole food-based food intake. So it's how we start our day. What are we going to have for breakfast? And let's do oatmeal. Let's do scrambled eggs. We can do a shake. Shakes are very easy to do. You can make a shake with protein powder if we have. If not, I won't. Most of the time they have the directions on how to do that. But you can make a shake at home. Your milk of choice. It can be cow's milk or soy milk. And because I say those two only because those two actually have protein in them. When you get into almond milk, unfortunately, there is no protein in almond milk. So I say if you're going to make a shake with that, either add protein powder or have 2 hard-boiled eggs on the side. But you can make a shake with your milk of choice, 8 ounces of milk. You can do about half a cup of oats, half a banana, or half a cup of berries, and a tablespoon of healthy fats, either flax or chia seeds. And you now have a full balanced protein shake or breakfast shake. And you can do that in the morning or as your lunch. But if we are going to do, I think the most common ones right now that I've seen with fasting during Lent is you are really not, you're having that one main meal and the two smaller snacks, especially on Wednesdays and Fridays. And that's where I say, make sure that meal, the easiest thing is like soups, because you throw in so much in there. You can throw in lentils, you can throw in quinoa, garbanzos, and a bunch of frozen vegetables or canned. And that's your protein and everything in there. If you want more protein, add hard-boiled eggs in there as well. But that's where I said all your meals should contain a well-balanced carbohydrates for energy and protein for satiety, and just making sure that we are getting the protein at the end of the day. It's what's going to keep us feeling full. Does that make sense?
Awesome. I know we had some questions. Diane, you said you had some questions or concerns about how to do things safely.
Well, I'm allergic to chia and flaxseed, so I could never do that. But I never knew that almond milk had no protein in it either.
They're more of a healthier fat in terms of the macronutrients. They're not a protein source. There is going to have minimal amounts of protein in there, but when we're thinking about compared to the volume and content to soy milk or cow's milk, it's going to not have that. I think it's about 1 gram of protein per 8 ounces. But almonds are amazing, especially raw, unroasted, unsalted, raw almonds and walnuts, great healthy fat and snack during the day to curb your appetite. Definitely there's a place for them, but specifically because I'm talking about making a shake, and if you're not having any protein powder in there, you do want some protein in there.
Is coconut okay?
Coconut is the same as almond milk. They're both a source of non-dairy that are great to keep you feeling that you are having your favorite foods. Like they're great for cereals, or if you're having oatmeal with it. It's nothing wrong with using it, but just making sure that in that meal or in that snack after to have enough protein. So whether it's yogurt as a snack or having a scrambled or hard-boiled egg next to that, that's fine. It doesn't have to be within that actual shake.
Okay.
And you mentioned the flax or chia seeds. That's fine if you are using almond milk. There's enough fat in there to account for the flax seeds. So you're having your healthy fat in that shake.
Okay.
So you don't need it.
Leila, I have a question for you. There's a lot of, I think, proteins and like shakes and milk substitutes have been kind of just at our faces everywhere we go. And sometimes it does, right? Like 16 grams or 32 grams of protein. You get cashew milk, almond milk. Are they then using like protein powder or some type of protein then in them? Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So when you read the almond milk, 4 times the protein, if you read the food label, they've added whey concentrate, which is not the best form of protein. It's cheaper. And I just say, if we are someone already that doesn't do a lot of dairy or meat, then I think at some point in our day, we've crossed the mind to just buy protein powder. Mm-hmm. And so most people already have protein powder, and then just using that protein powder on their own. So I always just look at that and I say, like, I'd rather just use the protein powder that I have at home. And the best form is, let me just quickly, it's obviously not to sell products here, but just to show you. Protein, guys, this is a brand, but it doesn't have to be this one. When you're looking at the food label, most protein powder, and is the more natural form, the easiest thing is it's not going to have, the best way to see this is, you guys know meat is protein, right? But meat does not have carbs, and meat is gluten-free. So you'll get all these protein powders that are like gluten-free, low carb. It naturally is gluten-free, low carb. So when you see the carbohydrates, it should have less than 5 if it's just protein powder. If it starts to have more protein, more carbs, then you got to read the full label and then start to see maybe they added other forms. Appropriate forms of carbs that they've added are like Orgain. They have 11 grams of carbs. And I'm like, wow, that must not be natural. But then when I look at their ingredients, their carbs are from, they've added let's see, grass fed. I'm trying to understand where the carbs are coming from here. I think it's like organic agave and like cellulose, and it's basically just they've pulverized the garbanzos. So I'm like, okay, so it's kind of clean forms of carbs, and this would be more of a meal replacement because there's carbs in it. But most protein powder should have very minimal carbs in it, because you should see it as a piece of as a meat portion. There's not carbs, and then you're adding your own carbs. So if you're making a shake with just protein, I'm adding my carbs with the fruit and the oats. But if my protein powder does have carbs in it, then all I will need to do is just add water or almond milk. And I don't need to add my own. It gets very complicated. And that's why I say nutrition is so individualized. It's where you're at and what you're looking for. But in the morning, yeah, just buying protein powder that just has very minimal carbs. That's where you need to then you can add it to things that have carbs like oats and like your oatmeal in the morning or your shake that you're adding fruit to. But Orgain is very good. It's more full balanced, and a lot of people take it because on the go, they just take it and go, and it's high nutrient. You're just going to read food labels. That's the key thing. I think someone had mentioned that we know the value of high nutrient meals, and it stems from anything, whether you have a health condition, you're trying to lose weight. When you're not feeding your body the appropriate amount of nutrients, and the best way to even summarize that is if you're not eating foods that actually have value to them, your body is not going to reap the benefits of the full potential of your body. We were all sorry, it's give me 1 second because I want to. Sorry, I just want to make sure there's no noise. Our bodies were designed to move at its maximum. So we're starting to feel tired. We know from fasting and from Lent, our body can survive with just water, and just making sure you're hydrating adequately. You can survive without water for 24 hours. I mean, with water only for 24 hours. So if you start to notice you're getting tired, definitely hydrate throughout the day. Hydrate. But if you're still eating, you need to consider, why am I tired if I'm eating? And really look at your food and be like, I realized I had a sandwich. It was a tuna sandwich, but actually that tuna was just covered in mayo and it was all on white bread. Like that really was not nourishing, or if I bought a soup, it was cream of broccoli, but it's all heavy cream and a lot of salt. So that thing just weighs our bodies down a lot. When you are making sure you're eating, especially during fasting, that you're eating less, really find that as an opportunity to build everything with purpose. If we start a day with purpose, why not eat with purpose? And making sure that everything in your breakfast and your lunch and dinner is all real food, guys. And I don't mean real food like it has to be the fish raw. This is real food. Even though it's canned, you can still see the flesh of the tuna. And like I know, like Nora mentioned, every day we're getting bombarded with things. Almond milk is not good for the soil or the earth anymore. So it's not, mercury in tuna. I will say there's a time and place for everything. With tuna, of course, if you're, the children are pregnant, we got to be careful with mercury. But I tell my patients or anyone, if this is your best bet over doing Burger King or buying your Starbucks breakfast sandwich, I'd rather you have this. We can spend all day, be here till 2022, talking about there's a bad in everything. But you have to think, if it's going to help you better off in your day, then do it. For me, I don't always do this because I think you get your protein from real food. Egg whites, beans, lentils, yogurt. Most mornings, guys, I don't have time. I have this in my car and I will put that in my shaker with water and a banana, and I have helped myself, because if I didn't do that, I would be forced to now stop and get something somewhere that would only weigh me down the rest of the day. So everyone has to just consider what is going to help them. Even like healthy snacks, edamame is really good too. High protein, better than chips, guys. So if we are really trying to get away from chips or crunchy things, there's so many other options just because you have a need for sweets or a need for crunchy things, nothing wrong with that, but find a better substitution. I found that I like crunchy things, and I was eating chips a lot. So this is good. Even roasted garbanzo, I also make my own, but it goes back to not everything can be realistically done from scratch, but make sure it's a better option. This is still gonna be better than chips. It's roasted garbanzos, unsalted, but I do make my own as well. It's a good option. Is you roast the canned garbanzos, and it's a really awesome high protein snack that you can have, and it still counts for the whole one main meal, two smaller snacks. It's high protein, guys. Uh, if you can eat meats and you're trying to have the smaller meals, even dehydrated chicken or like cooking chicken strips and letting them like overcook a little, they're really good cold too. It's high protein in the morning. People like to eat them, or hard boiled eggs. But everything I just mentioned is a real food, guys. It's things that you can see the actual ingredients. And that is the goal with everything that we start consuming, whether it's a shake or not. If you woke up and had a breakfast croissant, unfortunately that croissant is not a real food. You had to put all these things to make it together. So a better option is I would look at what did I put in the croissant? Eggs and ham, or just eggs and cheese. You can do real cheddar, that's fine. You can do a real egg. And I would say even a whole grain bread or Ezekiel bread is good, or just having it on its own with, raw vegetables. You don't need to have the bread. So, does that make sense? Everything with purpose.
So you
Yep, go ahead, Keith.
I'm sorry, you talked a lot, Lena, about things to eat, good things to eat and things to eliminate. Can you speak to recommendations about the schedule of fasting? For instance, are there suggestions like not eating from sun up to sundown, or Ramadan type of fast, or limiting intake for 24 hours to just a few basic things, or are there suggestions along the lines of when to eat these things?
Yes, and I mean, he can chime in as well. I think that's very individual on what someone is used to and what they can tolerate. What I would say to that is, number one, if you want to fast for 24 hours, that's fine. The most common are the Wednesday and Fridays. And you can do that every week of the Lent period, or you can just do them like people have done it. Just, the Ash Wednesday and then Good Friday. But I'd say the most common for full fast is 2 days a week, or just 1 day a week, because it's very obviously 24 hours and you just have 40 days. that would be a little much. But if you are doing the full 24 hours, hydrate. And if you wanted to do the Ramadan style, or which is sunrise to sundawn or sunset, water all day. And if you don't have diabetes, like I mentioned, if your body does require that steady stream of glucose, then I would obviously say that that's not something that I would benefit from. You don't want to do anything that's gonna take you. We're trying to do things to give us more health. So if things are gonna make us get away from a healthier body, cause low blood sugars, and we don't want that. If you have a wound or injury that you need the consistent protein during the day, then we don't want to do that either, because our body can only absorb a certain amount of protein at a time. So if you're giving all that at the end of the day, that's not going to be most beneficial to a wound healing, or if you're at risk of hospitalizations and things like that. But if you are gonna do the sunset to sunrise to sunset, it really depends on how often you're doing it. But when you do that, hydrate during the day, and at night is when it goes back to the whole making sure your meals are adequately nourished, because you're going to start entering this realm where it's all white processed flours and sweets. But that's not really doing yourself a favor, because then the next day you kind of go into this really low blood sugar, and then it starts to get unenjoyable. The thing is, it's to enjoy, embrace the journey. But if you want to do it 2 days a week, I think it's more realistic. to really embrace it. And that's where you can do the full 24 hours or just the sunrise to sunsets. But most common too is people just do they abstain from a certain food item those 2 days a week, the Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yeah, and I meant to qualify that to say for somebody who's not diabetic or doesn't have specific.
And are you interested in doing every Friday, or you want to do it every 2 days, the 2 days a week, or what are you looking for?
I guess I was thinking more along the lines of a sunrise to sunset.
And would you do that all 7 days of the week for 40 days?
Probably not. No. Probably a couple days a week would probably be.
Okay, and like I said, if you want to do the 2 days, the Wednesdays and Fridays, yes, I would say starting your day, hydrating.
Right.
The fast is not broken unless you have an actual calorie contributing liquid. So some people are on the fence with even electrolyte drinks. But, and again, if you tend to have like a low blood pressure, you're on blood pressure medication, are you?
Yeah, I do have blood pressure medication.
Yeah, so I mean,
a lot of water during the day.
Being careful, really monitoring that you don't get really dizzy, but it doesn't hurt to have. But you can also have, I mean, again, I think as we get older, we can be a little bit more forgiving. If you want to do some chicken broth or vegetable broth during the day and some like an electrolyte drink, then it's something that's more realistic, just to at least ease into it. And then if you notice that you can do the full just water from sunrise to sunset, a good thing is you really carry a gallon and make sure that you finish that gallon during that fasting period.
Yeah, and I drink probably a gallon of water a day. So.
And that's great. That's good. But make sure for sure during your fasting. And then when you eat, you guys can definitely still have something with more liquids in there, like soups, and it's whatever you feel comfortable breaking your fast with. But as she even mentioned, it's the importance of having it high nutrients, not putting it all to eat what I want.
Is there any flour that is good for you?
Of course. Well, I say flour that's refined and processed is just not good because it's been stripped away from all nutrients. So to me, it really is an empty calorie. If you're going to do flour, it depends on, are you going to make something from scratch or are you looking for things that are already made?
Well, either or, I guess.
So if you're making something from scratch, I would say you have the control to do, depending on what you're making. You can even use coconut flour, almond flour, if you're doing like baked items, or you're making oatmeal, you can pulverize it, use oat flour because that's all the fiber. There's also garbanzo flour, which is high protein. So those are things that you can dictate and make something from scratch. But there's also now pastas that are made with lentils. There's pasta made with edamame. So you can not feel guilty about having edamame or garbanzo penne with tomato sauce because literally in every bite you're having protein in there. It's not just flour. So there's that option. And if it's something that you're like, man, the bread, I do enjoy it. Well, does it have to be bread? Can you do in the morning maybe oatmeal? Or if you're making a sandwich, can it be lettuce wrap or a lettuce, like a lettuce boat? Or if you really need, maybe some people really enjoy like rice cakes with like the ham or rice cakes with cream cheese and eggs. But again, if bread is something that can probably be taken away during your fasting because you don't really need it, there's other healthier options. But we know out of fasting, whole grain bread is always great because it has the fiber in there.
What's your take on cauliflower pizza?
My take is depending how it's approached in the system. So if it's pre-made, frozen, it's most likely gonna have a lot of salt. And if you're someone that is on high blood pressure medication or not very active, when we're not very active, we don't tend to sweat out the salt as much. So it's gonna affect us more than someone that's more active. Cauliflower crust is, I think it's more of a trend. It's to lower the carbohydrate load in there in your meal, but it's a lot of fat and salt when they're pre-made, especially in restaurants. So what I would say is, well, number one, if we're abstaining from refined flours, we're not going to be able to eat the pizza. But if we're out of Lent and you are having that, I would say limit your pizza to 1 or 2 slices and having a really nice salad with cheese on it. Even like I said, you can still make your meal lower carb. Then I think the whole low carb things goes back to the purpose of Lent and abstaining is to not indulge in things. We get so used to overindulging, and when we have cauliflower or low carb marketed items, we're overindulging because we think it's healthier. So it's also like a way of saying like, well, I'm not gonna like do that, and just really restraining and saying, what makes you want to eat the low carb pizza, and maybe you can just do zucchini boats and cutting zucchini or eggplant, topping it with your favorite mozzarella cheese and some tomato sauce, and there is your actual whole base low carb pizza.
Okay.
You don't have to buy like the high sodium cauliflower crust, but I do make my own because I feel good and actually just having the cauliflower, which is vegetables, and I add shredded zucchini in there. So instead of topping my pizza with that, I'm having it in the crust and I top it with the same cheese. And so that's how I eat it. I eat it more like a flatbread, not like a pizza. But that's just because I like to change up how I eat my vegetables. But if you approach it that way, that's different, than, I just want to eat lower carb, because then you end up eating more fat and salt, But you can make your own zucchini boats and eggplant parmesan.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Again, thinking back to the whole base food item, like the frozen cauliflower crust, you look at it's all about looking at the ingredients. It's a lot of things. It's not really as natural. So finding ways to deconstruct everything and asking yourselves like, why do I like this? And how can I make it more from scratch? Pancakes. Sorry?
Thanks.
Okay. And if you're really a big fan of pancakes or waffles, you can make your own from using coconut flour and oat flour in the mornings and adding your eggs
Okay.
and milk.
Well, Diane just wanted to make sure everybody else had a chance to ask questions if they wanted to. So,
Rachel, Doris, questions? My son had his wisdom teeth pulled, and I went and bought a whole variety of mac and cheese to make the next couple of days. And I grabbed I don't know if it was cauliflower or broccoli, just because it looked healthy, but I think it actually had more calories, and it certainly didn't taste as good.
I mean, it's probably a bunch of fillers and it's more gummier if it's supposed to be like gluten-free. But unfortunately, we won't be able to have mac and cheese because we're restraining from refined flours, if that's what it is. So an option would be, again, you can do the lentil-based pasta and buying your own cheese. I don't recommend the cheese sauce like the Velveeta, but again, it's not realistic to do it all. If you can make your own cheese sauce, which all it really is if you're not using flour, you can do oat flour or like cornstarch with milk and your own fresh cheddar cheese. Let that thicken up, and now you have a cheese sauce, and then you add your own noodles. But that's a good way to then add frozen broccoli, add frozen vegetables, so you're adding more vegetables in that cheese sauce. But you may not even need the pasta. Just do cheesy broccoli. It's not necessary. I know. To be honest, guys, pastas are not really necessary, but there's a time and place.
So if I wanted to fast from sunrise to sunset, what would be the best breakfast? Is it your breakfast smoothie that you already recommended, or is there anything else you would say to kick off the day with?
Well, so you would start your day with something already?
Yeah.
And then you would start your fast so you would have to have breakfast at 5 a.m?
Let's say I was just fasting from 8 to 5. If I meant to do it, symbolically all day, like.
Yeah, then
Symbolically, yeah.
Yeah, I think a good option is that make sure there's enough protein because that's gonna satiate you for enough protein and a good healthy fat. So whether it's oatmeal in the morning, you can do the breakfast shake. You can do eggs, scrambled eggs with potatoes, and you can add cheese in there if you like. But if you don't want to do cheese, that's fine. I think people also want to abstain from too much, the dairy and things like that. But I usually have the understanding that people just wake up and they just don't eat anything all morning, and then they break it at sunset. They wake up and it's just water, 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 and then at night it's when they have their soups and things. But again, if you're older and you're more at risk of having low blood sugars, or you really want to do this symbolically, like you said, you don't have to be super strict. And yeah, starting your day with eggs or breakfast shake, very high protein, with a handful of nuts, and then starting your fast. It's more long-term sustainable.
And when I break it, I got to go slow, right? I shouldn't just jump right into cake and chocolate. Right?
You know the answer to that, yes. But I do say it seems silly because we want to start feeling our day like, okay, I want to just eat. Start with the salad because you're ready. You're gonna wake up your metabolism, get those symbols running, letting your body know that you're eating, so it can start dictating when it's the full satiety signal. But because a lot of people immediately jump into the rice and to the heavier starch-based items, but it's so dense. You want to fill up your stomach a little with some volume, and then you can definitely eat like a high. You can still have potatoes, you can still have your beans with it. Some people still do they'll like fried vegetables, fried green beans, and things like that's all fine. I know you want to make it indulging and enjoyable. Again, really stick to like avoiding the really heavy starches, white flours. But start with like a salad or the vegetable side, and then go into the potatoes and the lentils, the rice, things like that. You don't want to feel crappy at the end of the night.
So Keith, when you skip lunch, are you good with dinner, or then after dinner you need a snack before bed? Do you fill in your extra meal there?
Yeah, I actually do have a little snack with because I take a bunch of pills at night too, so I have something with that. That's my excuse anyway. But yeah.
So when do you normally fast?
Just skipping lunch, really. Just
Yeah.
Oatmeal, limited breakfast of oatmeal or cream of wheat and a banana, and then nothing until dinner, which is
Okay.
often pretty late. So in fact, we're waiting to eat now. So
And this is only during Lent.
no, this is pretty much all the time for me. Anyway.
Okay.
This is every day.
Yes. Well, just like I said, it's outside of the spiritual reasons. Just understand that especially as we get older and our metabolism slows down, and it slows down because we do lose muscle mass, and our muscle mass is what keeps our metabolism high. So as that starts to slow down, our body's not as strong at really digesting the food. So, you're just more at risk of like having heartburn, especially with the medication. So if you're able to have dinner a little earlier, or start your fast a little earlier, or maybe shortening it, then I think the mind will have more clarity if you end your fast earlier. That's where I've seen the most benefits of actual fasting, whether it's intermittent fasting or not, is trying to avoid eating and digesting during the periods where your body is recovering, which is during sleep time. And so if you're eating late, that interferes with that. You're not really recovering fully. So if you can just maybe end your fast earlier.
Well, I don't typically go more than 8 hours between the two meals, so my schedule's later all the way around.
Yeah.
So I'm not up at sunrise.
No, he does not have a normal schedule at all. Definitely not.
just yes, as long as the fasting and the periods are something that you feel is actually benefiting you. But I would say unless the body is really trained, prolonged periods of not eating, it's I mean with it's just it can cause a lot of like headaches and even just like short temperness because your body starts to feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So whether like even a handful of nuts at 4.
Mhm.
I call that hangry when you're
Yeah.
hungry and you get angry.
Uh,
But you do get those hungry headaches and then it makes you hangry. Yeah.
well, our bodies are just so miraculous. It will tell us when it's not comfortable, and you have to ask what's wrong. Half the time it's just you're not drinking enough water, but it's just it'll tell us when we're either we're not having eaten enough or we're eating too much. But it's just about having that connection with your body, and it's not the easiest, I know, with all the stuff going on in life. But at least here we have these 40 days to have a purpose, and it might not be comfortable at times, but for you, like switching it up, since you're used to doing that almost every day, maybe for this purpose of Lent, doing it differently and giving up something that has not been beneficial for you to allow that energy to be towards a stronger relationship with God.
All right, friends, I know we're at our time. Any question you didn't get to ask or comment you wanted to make? Nora, you got final words?
I do. Thank you again for joining tonight. If you have any questions that you may have forgotten to mention today, if you feel comfortable sharing that with Pastor Chris, and then if you would like to share it with me or Sam, I can relate to Leela if she's able to answer it, or if I can assist in any way. So our resources are still available to you all. I definitely want to keep that connection. I know that times are a little crazy, but we're still here for you. So if we can be of any service, please don't hesitate to reach out. You know how to get a hold of all of us here. So thank you for joining tonight. And I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and, got some inspiration maybe to either start your Lenten journey maybe a little later, or to have enough motivation to follow through with it. So thank you again.
Thank you, Leela. I made lots of notes. I really appreciate all your tips and how to do things in a more healthy way. I appreciate your focus on doing it with intention and purpose and meaning and supporting our congregation. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that everyone who did tune in. This is awesome, and it's great that you're doing this. So more awareness. That's awesome.